Hello, Tech Pros, episode 109.
Welcome to the podcast where I chat with professionals who are getting the job done using technology 7 days a week. Each week, we start with Motivation Monday. Tuesday is about productivity, Wednesday, leadership, Thursday, technology, Friday, people and communication, Saturday, entrepreneurship, and Sunday, being unplugged. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, David Platt. Happy Thursday, David.
Happy Thursday to you, Chad. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and I'm excited to be here on your show.
Awesome. Thank you. Are you geeked out and ready to talk technology?
I am always geeked out and always ready to talk technology.
Awesome.
It's a blast.
I heard that you were, so this is why we have you today. This is awesome.
My pleasure.
David S. Platt teaches .NET programming at Harvard University Extension School and at companies all over the world. He's the author of 11 programming books, including Why Software Sucks and Introducing Microsoft.NET. Microsoft named him a software legend in 2002. And since then, he's also got a brand new book out called The Joy of UX, User Experience and Interactive Design for Developers. So, David, how on earth did you get the title Software Legend by Microsoft in 2002?
It was a promotional thing they were doing with some of their top guys, independent guys. They named us all software legends. David Chappell was in there, Jeff Richter, Yuval Lowy, Billy Hollis, all of these guys. And it was some fun things. They gave us all personas. I'm the .NET professor because I have this gig at Harvard, and we had a lot of good times.
Awesome. Well, if regardless if it comes from marketing or if it comes from someone in a leadership position, the title sticks. And so here you are.
It does. Yes. We're probably going to have a reunion one of these years, so keep your eye out for that.
Awesome. Comeback tour.
Indeed.
So David, here on Hello Tech Pros, it's all about the past, the present, the future of technology. And you are a software developer and a UX expert. So I thought maybe we could talk about user experience on this show and go into, start with the past of user experience and what you saw as you first got into software development back in the day and you started writing books and teaching people all about it. Kind of what was that origin story? What was it like a while back?
Well, back in the day, and we're talking 20 years ago and more here, even back in the days of DOS, user experience was absolutely terrible by contemporary standards. Although by the standards of the day, it was the best that anybody had. We were happy to get our computing jobs done, our words processed, our sheets spread, things like this. And if we had to memorize obscure commands and have quick reference cards pasted to our monitors and stuff like that, it was a price that we willingly paid. It was the best that we had, just as when people started getting cars. They didn't mind having to crank the engine because it meant you now had a car. You didn't have to shovel horse crap out of the barn every day. It was a huge improvement on what we had before. But, of course, there is only one science in all of humanity, and that is the science of discontent. And whatever it is that you have, you say, yeah, okay, that's whatever you grow up with. Yeah, hey, that's great. Whatever. Now I want more. And I was 25 when I got my first computer. I was astonished. Holy Toledo, I have one of these things I can afford it. It lives on my dining room table, etc. And that was a huge advance. But the 5-year-olds who were born then didn't know anything different. And they wanted things better. They wanted things easier. They just as the people that grew up with cars in their garages with Model Ts soon started to demand, hey, how about a self-starter on this thing? Why do I have to crank it every time? And then how about a heater? And then how about a radio? And then how about air conditioning? And how about cup holders? And satellite radio? And soon it's going to be self-driving. And the same thing is happening in software. And people are just demanding better and better and better software. Specifically, not so much from the functionality standpoint, but from their own standpoints of easier to use, takes less time to figure out, harder to hurt somebody's self with it, better from the user's own point of view, not necessarily the developer's point of view. And so there's been some kickback on that. In the beginning, all the users were developers themselves, and they thought that software should not be easy to use, so that only those people that have proven themselves themselves worthy through intellectual struggle, such as themselves, would be able to take advantage of their brilliance. And of course, that doesn't work anymore. And now today with ubiquitous computing, with your mobile in your pocket at all times, and your toothbrush having more computing power than the Apollo 11 command module had, we are just insisting, everybody's insisting everywhere on software being easy to use. And for people who don't believe me, what is the most valuable company ever seen on the face of the planet in terms of market cap? Well, it's Apple, isn't it?
Nice.
All right. And why is it Apple? Well, because they've always had good UX, but customers were not willing to pay their premium prices until 3 or 4 years ago when they said, okay, we've had enough, and good stuff is possible, and we are now ready to pay for it. And that's where the money is now. And you see this in the consumer sector. All right. If you don't believe me here, one word, iPhone.
Right.
Okay. But it is also starting to happen in the enterprise sector. I wrote I have a column on MSDN in the back page of MSDN magazine. The title, it's the monthly column. The title is "Don't Get Me Started." And a couple of years ago, I wrote Avon, the makeup guys, had a $125 million system that they had to trash. They built it, and the user interface was so absolutely terrible that their independent sales reps quit the company rather than use it. They said, "Forget it. I don't make any money if I use this." And they walked away. And Avon had to throw it $1/8 of $1 billion pissed down a rat hole because of bad UX. And that's bad UX on the enterprise sector. Up until now, people who worked in banks or in companies or whatever had to take whatever their IT staff shoved down their throats. And IT never prized good UX. You would think that they would, because the productivity of their users accrues directly to the company. You would think that they wanted them more productive so that there would be fewer calls for help to IT. I don't know. Maybe they're trying to keep themselves in business here. But my July 2016 column, which is coming out in the printed copies are probably already mailed. It'll be up on the website July 1st this weekend. Talks about 2 other companies that had terrible trouble because of bad UX in the enterprise sector, not just rounding off corners to have a pretty phone, but because users in the enterprise sector were extremely non-productive. Target, the department stores, tried to expand into Canada. And long story short, they couldn't do it. Why couldn't they do it? Because their software had bad UX. They needed to enter all of the data for all of the products that they had in Canada. They needed things like metric measurements. They needed things like French language characters, stuff like this. And long story short, they didn't have it. And it was so absolutely terrible that the thing crashed in flames. And you think $125 million is a lot of money to piss down a rat hole. Well, it cost Target $5 billion with a B, billion dollars, trying to go into Canada and then failing because of bad UX on their software. And the second case that I discuss in that column is Massachusetts General Hospital right here in Boston, where I live near. I'm in Ipswich, Massachusetts, a small clam digging town just north of Boston. And they are rolling out new software here in Mass General, and the Boston Globe ran an article on it saying just how absolutely terrible it is, how users are just in tears at how awful it is, how people are retiring, how it's quitting. It said, quote, the new program has an insatiable demand for information that, keystroke by keystroke, click by click, overwhelms the already tightly wrapped day inside a hospital, eats away at time with patients, and sometimes forces them to work longer shifts. Simple tasks like ordering medications and tests can take several minutes longer, forcing patients to wait around while staff navigate the system. And one doctor reported she spent half her days on the computer with her back to patients. Now, is that how you want your doctors to go? No, it isn't. A maternity nurse, said she became a captive of the keyboard, spending far more of her time recording every blood pressure reading, every feeding, every diaper change, and more than once she has burst into tears on the drive home. Now,
wow.
The vendor says our goal is to make the software a joy to use. Well, unless that nurse is sobbing with happiness, they have a long way to go. So it has, until fairly recently, it has never occurred to anybody that, hey, you know what? We need to think from the user. We need to start from the user. We need to start from the user and work inwards rather than from the software and work outwards. Invariably, the geek. I'm doing a project this morning. Just what can we for some a company near here, and I'm throwing together this and I'm throwing together that, and we're going to have some stuff that was built internally based on database kind of stuff, and the client is going to say, well, all right, how do we take this and throw this out to people? And I am going to try to say to him, and I don't know how far I'm going to get with this. I'm going to try to say to him, hey, Joe, listen, you're asking the wrong question here. The real question is, hey, look, who are our users? What problems are a user trying to solve? And now using this technology that I've sort of figured out for you here, how can we help them solve those problems using this technology I just figured it out? Anyway, that's that's the past, that's the present, and Jesus, I sure hope that's going to be the future.
Man, such great stuff, David. I mean, just thinking about when we started with, what we want to solve productivity problems, right? We want that horse to be able to run longer or faster without having to stop for water, right?
Exactly.
Or on the software side, we want to be able to compute mathematically all these formulas and all these things repetitively without having to, do them by longhand. And so we're building machines to do those and solve those problems. And so originally it was really about solving problems. And to your point, nobody cared about the user interface. The user interface was awesome because it meant that you were getting more stuff done. But now we're allowing individuals to solve problems for other people, right? Solve problems not for myself, but I'm solving a problem for the bank that I work for or the retail company that I work for. And as an individual, it's slowing me down, right? These complex, arcane user interfaces and all these commands that I have to memorize, it's slowing me down as an individual and making me having to work overtime or think and stress out about the things that I have to do, even though the data that I'm capturing and all the things that are being processed on the back end are doing great things for the company. But as an individual, it kind of sucks to be me, right? So what can we do to make my job a little easier?
That's exactly it. Back in the day, John von Neumann, the Harvard Mark I computer with the electronic relays that's in the lobby of the Science Center right now. John von Neumann, the day before it was dedicated, came and ran his calculations for the implosion waves, to calculate the implosion waves on the explosive lenses on the plutonium bomb, so we could burn Nagasaki to the ground. And that was our industry's original sin, if you want to go read back through my columns. But he was, I hate to say happy, but he at the time he needed to get that job done, and that was the only way that job could get done. And if he had to wait around for a while for the thing to turn through, well, that was okay with him. But today, just you see how things have evolved. My daughters have grown up. They have never known a time without PCs, and they expect things to be easy. And when they see me trying to work with some of this old software, having to do a tonsillectomy through the rectum to try and get anything done, they say, "Why the hell did they write it like this?" Just yesterday, my high school daughter was. And they tell people when they see them, and this is their English teacher was my older daughter's English teacher was struggling with their classroom software up there on the monitor with all the students looking at her and laughing at her, and my daughter saying, "Well, why did they have this over here? It shouldn't be over here. It should be over there. Why do you have to click? Why can't you do that?" And the teacher was saying, "Well, we should. You're right. We should." And that's what I really wanted Why Software Sucks to do, to explain to users. That book was more for users than it was for geeks, although it's sold more to geeks than to users. To try to explain to these consumers of software that, hey, look, you do have a choice. Software sucks not because it has to. It is not an inherent property of the medium. It sucks because the geeks who write it do not take your thoughts into account, your thoughts, your feelings, your hopes, your fears into account when they are building their software. They start from the software and work outwards. And what really needs to happen is you really need to start developers need to learn to, hey, start with a user and work inwards. Who is our user? What problem is the user trying to solve? What would the user consider to be the characteristics of a good solution? And then, and only then, can you start saying, well, okay, now how close can we get to this with the tools and software that we have available? That's what needs to happen. And the new book, The Joy of UX, I thought Why Software Sucks explaining just what the problems were, would cause the users to rise up and revolt. But what happened when I would talk to geeks, they say, well, yeah, okay, interesting, but hey, you know what? We don't really know how to do these things. We don't know how to figure out who the user is. We don't know how to write down what the user needs to have. We don't know how to get user feedback. We don't know how to do this telemetry to find out what the users really are doing rather than what they are willing to admit to doing or what we think they're doing or what they can remember doing. How do we do these things? You told us we need to do them. Great. Okay, fine. I'll swallow that. Now, how the hell do we do these? And that is what The Joy of UX is about. And I was really happy to snag that title. Any resemblance to the Joy of Sex is one heck of a coincidence now, isn't it? But anyway,
it sounds wonderful. So as software developers, you said back when you wrote Why Software Sucks, it's really about, we need to talk to users. We need to think from the user's perspective, not from a software developer's perspective.
Exactly. Yes.
But as software developers, we spend so much time like practicing our craft and trying to get good at algorithms and good languages and database structures and all these technical things that, learning a new business acumen, learning a new business model or a new industry model is very, very difficult, right? To just go out on your own and learn it. And so you have to trust in your business analysts and your project managers and all the individuals that you're pulling from a community of users to be able to learn from them. So as you wrote The Joy of UX, how do you teach people how to get involved with those different thoughts and the different users and get their mindset into the software?
Oh, well, buy yourself a copy and you'll see. And everybody else who's listening there too. It's in Amazon. Thank you very much. It was it was on launch the number one bestseller on Amazon in the topic of new books on web usability, which is sort of like being the tallest building in Wichita, Kansas, but okay, fine, I'll take what I can get. My contention in the book is that, we are taught several things. First of all, we think that we're taught that it's hard. You know what? It's not that hard. When a programmer geek starts with something, Expression Blend was the classic example. They say, okay, we got to write a new project, and quickly they will fire up Expression Blend and they will start dragging and dropping. Okay, should the navigation links go on the left or maybe along the top? I said, no, you're asking the wrong question. You have to say, who are the users here? Oh, what do you mean, who are the users? Well, okay, are they male or are they female? Men and women use computers in completely different ways. They've got completely different mindsets. You can find a lot of this in, there's a very good book called Why We Buy, The Science of Shopping by Paco Underhill, in which he goes into different male and female usage patterns of things. Are they older? Are they younger? And are they more computer literate? Are they less computer literate? Are they more educated? Are they less educated? I was talking to a medical school. I was doing some stuff. I was advising them on a project, and they wanted to bring this particular kind of thing to the medically underserved community. You're talking about people with less than that are 50 and 60 years old, less than a high school education, and they said, fine, well, they're going to click here, they're going to drag here, they're going to drop there. And I said, how the hell are you going to teach these guys to do that? Because that is not the world that they grew up in. It's the world that you grew up in, but it's not the world that they grew up in. How are you going to teach them to do this? And so, we'll put them through training. Bullshit. Not going to happen. So my contention is that the steps that you have to go through are the same no matter what the technology is. And a lot of people think that, web usability is different from mobile usability, is different from desktop usability, is different from device usability. And I say that's wrong. To my way of thinking, the fundamental principles that underlie all usability are the same everywhere, just as the laws of physics, the laws of gravitation, govern all motion from the collisions of galaxies to the falling of a feather. And if you understand these fundamental laws, you will understand the kinds of things that you will need to do. You'll have a fighting chance of getting started in the right direction. Whereas if you do not understand these laws and just kind of jump into things, there is no way, no how that you are going to be able to reach the contemporary standard of care. For example, you start off, the very first question, and that's chapter 1, is who. right? Who's on first? Who are our users? As I said, are they male or are they female, younger or older? And a lot of times people don't know this. Um, and if nothing else, getting started on this means that you have to go start finding out and starting to measure these kinds of things. For example, I was in Iceland. I was doing a gig and I was teaching at a bank, and the bank was talking about their new kind of software they were going to do, and this is back when there were banks in Iceland. Dating myself here a little, I guess. Anyway, so I said, who are the users? Well, we're not sure. Are they male or female? We don't really know. Okay, what are their ages? We're not. I don't know. We better find out, hadn't we? Okay, fine. We took a break. Started walking through the bank. Walked through the lobby of the bank to the place where the good coffee was, and I look over by the window and I see a bunch of people sitting there. I say, "Hey, you guys, look." The devs, you guys over there, are those the users you're talking about? Yeah, I guess they are. All right. Well, you know what? Look at them. There's about 20 of them, and you know what? Every single one of them is female. In fact, the only Y chromosomes in this whole room right now are you, me, and that guard looking at us kind of suspiciously. You know, the users are 100% female. Is it like that way everywhere? Yeah, I guess it is. We never really thought of that. Aha. All right. And you know, I don't really want to go ask them their ages. I mean, you know, safer to kiss a live rattlesnake. But just looking over, there's 20 of them. 15 of them got gray hair. Mm-hmm. So you know, you're talking about 50-year-old women. That's who your user group is, and you know who that's like. That's a lot like your mother's. So you know, when you think about writing your software, write software that your mother would use, and you would probably be not a whole lot closer to this user group than you were going to be. And so indeed it proved. And so you do your research, you find these out, and then you write up what's called a persona. This is an artificial person that represents your user group. If I say, hey, is the user going to like such and such? That's one kind of thing. Mm-hmm. If I say, hey, is Aunt Millie going to like such and such? It's an entirely different question, isn't it? Yeah. You can just feel different parts of your brain lining up, can't you? When you're forced to kind of, when it's this nebulous, you know, amorphous, the user kind of thing, versus when it's a specific person, right? Think about, again, dating myself, ads about famine in Nigeria. Didn't get much in the way of charitable donations, but Save the Children, where they put one starving child's face on an advertisement, and you can help save so-and-so for $10 a month, or you can turn the page. Well, that's a whole lot more effective. The specific, we are hardwired to care about specific individuals, and that's how you have to model your users. You start with a persona, maybe two, usually not more than two. Three is not usually necessary. And you come up with these artificial persons, and you have pictures of them, you have quotes from them, you put them on posters around your lab. It is much easier to understand a user if you think in terms of specific, albeit fictional users. And again, this is the same kind of thing, whether you're doing mobile, you're doing web, you're doing desktop, you're doing enterprise, you're doing consumer. You have to do these kinds of things. And in my book, I have templates that you can fill out. Okay, what's the guy's name, etc. And some examples of here's what a sample persona looks like. A form you can fill out to get one, and that's where you start. Now, is that hard? I don't think that's very hard. You have to sort of think about your users, and hey, let's face it, a lot of geeks went into the software business because they don't like thinking about people or talking to people.
Right.
But I'm sorry, this is now necessary in the contemporary standard of care. Even if it's not your main job, you need to understand, every geek today needs to understand UX in the same way that it is just part of the landscape, that they needed to understand services 5 years ago and objects 10 years ago and functions 15 years ago. This is what the contemporary world needs right now. And if you are going to work in this world, if nothing else, even if you're not going to be out there interviewing users, you're going to need to understand when the business analysts come back and say the users will do this, but they won't do that. You need to have some notion as to where this comes from, why they're thinking about it, why it's important. And you say, damn it, why do I have to write the code that does such and such? It'd be so much easier to write the code that was something else. And they say, well, the users won't stand for it. Well, why won't they? It's because they're paying the money. So that's something that you need to do. So and I've got this is it's going nuclear on the geeks. I try not to use this, but when I do, it just hits them.
What is it?
It is the magic word. It is the master word of the jungle. If you remember your Jungle Book by Kipling, and they say, well, why don't we want to do this? I mean, the users want to do this. I mean, I don't want to do this. And the answer, and all I say to them is, I look them in the eye and say, well, you're smart enough, aren't you?
Hmm.
And it hits them between wind and water, and there's no backing down. So.
So you're really challenging the geeks, the technical professionals, the software developers that
yes.
Hey, you got into this business because you're smart, because you want to solve problems, and
yes.
this is just another problem, right?
That's absolutely
Getting
right.
Aunt Millie to use your software is just another problem that you need to overcome, and it's
That's
an
exactly
important problem because if Aunt Millie doesn't use it, then that means there's no.
Then you don't have a job.
Then you don't have a job.
Aunt Millie used to be willing to bend herself into a 5-dimensional hyperpretzel 20 years ago to get her stuff done. But today she is not willing to bend herself into a 5-dimensional hyperpretzel. She's too old, her bones are too creaky, and she wants a helping hand, and it's your job to give it to her.
So, David, this is awesome stuff about what you call a contemporary
standard of care, I sometimes use that.
Yeah, standard of care of how we should think about our users, and not just users as amorphous, this buzzword of users, the people that we don't know who, but really driving down into the names and the
That's
demographics
exactly right.
and exactly who are going to use it. In just a moment, I want to ask you about the future of user experience and how, different devices and different things, and as people are growing up used to technology, what they're going to think someday in the future. But first, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors.
This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by Minio Cloud Storage. Minio is a cloud object storage server for developers and DevOps written in Go. The Go programming language is the emerging language of choice for modern cloud infrastructure projects, and it allows Minio to be highly concurrent and lightweight. Minio is Amazon S3 compatible, built with microstorage architecture in mind, but at its heart, Minio is simple, scalable, and supported by a passionate developer and user community. In episode 89 of Hello Tech Pros, I talked with A.B. Periasamy, one of the founders of Minio, about the importance of community support and recruiting software developers who are as passionate about their product's code as artists are of their art. Check out that episode at hellotechpros.com/89 and check out Minio Cloud Storage at minio.io. That's minio.io.
Okay, we're back with software legend David Platt, who's talking about, when we started software development years and years ago, it was a lot like when we started developing cars. There was really no expectations on how to use it because the only people using it were the people that were building it. And it was because they wanted to solve math problems, science problems, business problems, but it was really the technical people interacting with it. Well, now that we've got where more and more individuals just in life are solving their own problems and trying to use technology to be more productive, they have a different set of expectations on how they want to interact with technology. And they're just not going to stand for crappy interfaces that they used to have to use 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 months ago. They want things easier, they want things simple, and they want things built specifically for them, for their individual needs and use cases. So, David, as we think about how the individuals who are growing up, right? My daughter, who is 6 years old and who has had an iPad for the last several years and is used to, clicking and buttons and just always connected to the internet. Her use cases when she gets to be an adult, as she's 30, 40, 50 years old, interacting with technology to get things done, are going to be completely different than what I think about is user interface design, right? So as we progress, as we get into virtual reality and we get into wearables and we get into all these different ways that we interact with technology, what's the future look like and how should we prepare for it?
Out of the future of UX, I've been thinking about that a lot. I saw Microsoft Research's head of development, a guy named Harry Shum, give a talk at a Microsoft conference, and he was paraphrasing Arthur C. Clarke. Remember how he used to say, or Clarke would say that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic?
Yeah.
Well, what Harry was saying was that any sufficiently advanced technology is invisible. that you just don't notice it at all. For example, when you start your car, do you think about the car starter? No, not really, unless it's broken, and you just don't think about it. And we're going to see more and more and more of that, less thinking about stuff. Just on a simple, like you open Microsoft Word, you make some changes, you go in close Word, and right now you have to save your changes. But fairly soon, I'm thinking that Word will just save them for you, and if you want to discard them, you'll go ahead and do the work. But most people, most of the time, just want to save their changes and stuff like that. For another example, in my book, I have a sample. The Boston area commuter rail has a mobile app, and it's absolutely terrible. Okay, it would have to improve by 2 or 3 notches to reach the level of sucking, and
Nice.
and the reason that it's so bad is because it takes all of the information that they have, all of their schedules for all of the lines and all of the trains and all of the places, and just throws it at you. And it's up to you to pick and choose through it and find the one small piece way down in the middle of all that crap that is the piece that you want. And in my book, I demonstrate how, with just a little bit of thought, what do you want to know when you want to take the commuter rail? What do you want to know? Well, you want to know when the next train is, don't you?
Right.
And because you're almost always going from the same place to the same place, and you would just like to bring that up and look at your phone and it says, aha, the next train home was at 4:47 or in 12 and a half minutes, something like that. And this can fairly easily be done. All you have to do is understand that you need to think in terms of the user and understand who the user is and what problems the user is looking to solve. Not just take this whole pile of crap and just dump it on the user and say, here, your problem, turkey, but rather sort through it carefully. Figure out where the user is coming from. Look at the ticket that he bought, and that's the station where he started. He almost always wants to go back to the same station. That's how commuter rail works. Look at the use cell level location. It takes very little. You'll find out what station he's at, and then say, okay, when is the next train from here to there? And show him the trains going back from where he is to where he wants to go. And instead of opening up the app and having to sort through all this crap, instead of opening the app up, and it'll just say, here's where you are, here's the next train going to where you're going, and here's the one after that and the one after that. And you can see that Google, Jesus, just yesterday, day before, I noticed on my new Google phone that that I was driving and I parked and I walked away, and then I swiped to the Google tab for, I can't remember why, and Google said, aha, you parked here, an 8-minute walk away. Google just noticed that I was traveling at car speeds, noticed that I had stopped traveling at car speeds, noticed that I started traveling at walking speeds, and just said, hey, you must have been driving and now you're parked. So instead of making you remember where you are, we'll just do it, and you just look at it. It's that kind of thing. And that's the kind of thing I talk about in my book. If you go to the book's website, which is joyofux.com, you will find a sample chapter that talks about this MBTA, the commuter rail app that I was talking about. Making things invisible, that's the next step. And on the book's website, that's where you will find a free sample chapter that will show you how to take the first steps along those lines. And the other thing is I offer workshops to companies that are looking to do this. I'll come in and I'll work with your guys for a week, and we'll work on your specific projects. We'll spin up personas for your specific products that you're trying to build, not just abstract pieces, but things you're really trying to do. We'll write stories for the things that you're trying to do, and so on. And so that's how you can have me come and help that. And in fact, for this summer, because it's my slow season, I've got 50% off. I'm offering 50% off through September 1st. So hop on it if that's something that you want. Because that's where I think we're going. We're going to be invisible. There are a couple of good examples of that, and I'd be happy to come help you figure out how to do it for your own stuff.
Awesome stuff, David. I love the concept of invisible technology or invisible user experience, right? I just want it to happen without my involvement, right?
Yes.
If you don't have to display a screen and it just happens and it magically knows where I am and what my needs are, and the things just show up at my door, or the directions to where my car is parked is just magically appears.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I want to get to. So awesome stuff, David. Thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value your insight and appreciate you spending time out of your busy Thursday to spend time with us.
And thank you so very much for inviting me and to speak to your user population, because that's who it's about. The guys that listen to you are the guys that make this stuff work, and I hope they'll listen to me and make it work the way that I think the world needs to go.
Awesome. You bet, David. Thank you. Tech Pros, remember, if you are not thinking about the user, if you're thinking about the algorithms and the data and all the plumbing behind the scenes, that's great. But really ask yourself, ask your bosses, ask the users, who specifically, right? Who specifically is using this? Is it going to be Chad or is it going to be Chad's mom? There's a big difference there. And we want to get it right for the right users and eventually get to that point of transparent UX. If you have questions about that, you can contact David through joyofux.com, and I'll have all the resources and all of David's books and everything linked up here on the show notes page at hellotechpros.com. Thanks so much, and take care.
The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/109. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been Technology Thursday, but tomorrow my featured guest and I discuss people and communication. On Saturday, we talk entrepreneurship, Sunday, being unplugged, Monday, motivation, Tuesday, productivity, Wednesday, leadership, and back again on Thursday to discuss technology once again. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.